The silent accuser, when the past calls from the abyss. Ethan was a psychologist. His office was located on the second floor of an old building on the outskirts of the city. It was a quiet, secluded place where he spent his days listening to his patients, helping them sort through their problems, fears, and anxieties. He prided himself on his ability to remain calm, analyze, and find the roots of issues to offer solutions. For Ethan, life was logical and orderly. He believed that everything could be explained. Everything could be solved if approached with a cold, rational mind. Emotions, in his opinion, were merely distractions that clouded clear thinking. But one day, everything changed. The calls began. At first, they were random, mistaken calls. Late at night, Ethan didn't pay much attention to them, chalking them up to network glitches or wrong numbers. But the calls kept coming. Each time, they became more frequent, more insistent. On the other end, he heard only silence, sometimes faint whispers or ragged breathing. These sounds were so ominous that Ethan began to feel uneasy, though he tried to convince himself it was just some stupid prank. One night, as he was about to go to bed, the phone rang again. Ethan picked up, expecting to hear the usual silence, but instead, a voice spoke. A voice he knew. "You don't know, do you?" It said, cold and accusatory. Ethan froze. His heart clenched as if someone had squeezed it in their fist. He recognized the voice. It was the voice of his sister, Lena. But that was impossible. Lena had died 3 years ago in a car accident. He had identified her body himself, handled all the formalities. He remembered her face, her smile, her laugh. He remembered the emptiness that had been left behind after her death. "Lena," he whispered, his voice trembling. Is that you?" "You don't know, Ethan," the voice continued. "You didn't see. You didn't understand. I didn't die in the accident. I was murdered." Ethan felt his body go numb. He couldn't believe his ears. His mind refused to accept what he was hearing. "What? How?" he asked, his voice strained. "Who killed you, Lena?" "Him, Ethan. Your patient. Alexander." "You didn't know." Lena's voice was quiet, but it carried pain and despair. Ethan couldn't comprehend it. Alexander. His patient. He remembered the man, anxious, insecure, but always seeming harmless. Alexander had come to him for sessions, talked about his fears, his life. Ethan had tried to help him, as he had helped so many others. How could this man be a killer? How could he have hidden his true nature? "He was obsessed with me, Ethan," Lena continued. "He wanted me, and when I refused him, he killed me." Ethan felt his breath grow heavy. He remembered how Lena had told him about strange calls, about someone following her. But he hadn't taken it seriously. He thought it was just her paranoia, her anxiety. He was sure it could all be explained logically. But now he realized he had been blind. He hadn't seen the threat that was right in front of him. "Lena, I didn't know," he whispered, feeling his hands begin to shake. "I couldn't have known. I was blind." "You couldn't have known, Ethan." Lena's voice softened, but there was still pain in it. "But now you do. And you have to do something. You have to stop him." Ethan felt his heart tighten with guilt. He hadn't been able to protect his sister. He hadn't seen the threat that had been so close. Now he couldn't bring her back, but he could at least try to make things right. The next day, Ethan called Alexander in for a session. He was determined. He could no longer just be a psychologist. Now he was a brother who wanted revenge for his sister's death. Alexander arrived as usual. He sat across from Ethan, nervously twisting a glass of water in his hands. His face was tense, his eyes darting around the room as if he sensed something was wrong. "Alexander," Ethan began, his voice calm but with a steely firmness. "How have you been? You seem agitated." Alexander forced a nervous smile, his fingers gripping the glass so tightly his knuckles turned white. "Yeah, just work stuff," he muttered, avoiding Ethan's gaze. "Work?" Ethan leaned forward, his eyes piercing, as if he could see right through him. "Or something else. You know, Alexander, I've noticed you've been more withdrawn lately. You're talking less than before. Is something bothering you?" Alexander froze, his eyes flicking toward the door as if searching for an escape. No, nothing really. He tried to smile, but it came out crooked. Just thoughts. What kind of thoughts? Ethan didn't break eye contact. You can tell me anything. I'm here to help you. Alexander hesitated. He clutched the glass so hard the water nearly spilled. I don't know, he stammered, his voice trembling. Sometimes I feel like I'm doing something wrong. Like I can't control myself. Ethan felt his chest tighten. He could see Alexander beginning to unravel, his defenses crumbling. This was the moment he had been waiting for. You're talking about control, Ethan said slowly, his voice soft but with a razor-sharp edge. But what if you've already lost it? What if you've done something you now regret? Alexander flinched, his face paling. What are you talking about? His voice was barely audible. I'm saying that sometimes we do things we can't explain, Ethan continued, his words deliberate, as if hammering them into Alexander's mind. We lose ourselves, and then we can hurt others. Do you understand what I'm saying? Alexander froze, his eyes wide with terror. He couldn't look away from Ethan, as if hypnotized. I don't know, he whispered, his voice shaking. I didn't mean to hurt anyone. But you did, Ethan said quietly, but with such certainty that Alexander couldn't doubt it. You did, and now you can't take it back. But you can confess. You can free yourself from this. Alexander buried his face in his hands, his body shaking with sobs. I didn't mean to, he repeated like a mantra. I didn't mean to. Ethan watched him, his face stone cold. He felt no pity. He knew Alexander deserved this. He knew this was only the beginning. Over the next few weeks, Ethan continued his sessions with Alexander. Slowly, methodically, he broke him down, forcing him to confront what he had done. He used every psychological trick in the book to manipulate him, to make him suffer. Alexander began to lose touch with reality. He saw Lena in his dreams, heard her voice when he was alone. He couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. His life became a living nightmare. Ethan watched it all with cold satisfaction. He knew he couldn't bring Lena back, but he could at least make Alexander pay for what he had done. One day, during another session, Alexander finally broke. I killed her, he whispered, his voice full of despair. I killed her. I didn't mean to, but I couldn't stop myself. Ethan looked at him, his face impassive. You know what you have to do now, he said quietly. You have to confess. You have to face the consequences. Alexander nodded, tears streaming down his face. He knew Ethan was right. He knew he couldn't live with this anymore. The next day, Alexander went to the police and confessed to Lena's murder. He was arrested and sentenced to life in prison. Ethan watched it all from the sidelines. He didn't feel relief. He knew he couldn't bring Lena back, but he had done everything he could. He had given her justice. Now he was alone. His life had changed forever. He was no longer the calm, rational psychologist who believed everything could be solved with logic. Now he was just a man who had lost his sister and failed to protect her. And that guilt would haunt him for the rest of his days. Jack's biography, The Darkness That Consumed Him. Jack was born in a forgotten Irish village, nestled among fog-drenched hills and murky bogs. From childhood, he was marked by strangeness. His eyes, cold and piercing, seemed to glimpse shadows others could not. He grew up in poverty, yet even when starving, he swindled neighbors out of their last scraps. Over time, his heart turned black as tar, and his soul hollow as the autumn wind. Jack became infamous as a drunkard and a cheat. He spent nights in taverns, his raspy, mocking voice rising above clinking ale mugs. He drank, lied, and laughed at those ensnared by his schemes. Yet even in his drunken stupors, he sensed something watching him. The shadows in tavern corners thickened unnaturally, and the wind outside whispered his name with unsettling urgency. The first encounter with the devil, a bargain in the dark. One night, as Jack stumbled home along a forest path, he felt a presence trailing him. The wind died, and in the silence came heavy, deliberate footsteps. Jack turned and saw a figure, tall, gaunt, with eyes glowing like embers. It was the devil. "Your soul is mine, Jack," the devil hissed, his voice like the creak of rusted hinges. "You've lived a life of sin, and now I've come to claim you." Trembling yet cunning, Jack bared his yellowed teeth in a grin. "Before you take me," he slurred, "let's share one last drink." "A toast to my wicked life," the devil, ever fond of games, agreed. They entered a tavern, where Jack ordered the strongest ale. As the devil raised his mug, Jack whispered, "Turn yourself into a coin to pay for this drink. A final trick for you to see." Confident in his power, the devil transformed into a silver coin. But the moment he did, Jack snatched him up and shoved him into a pocket lined with a silver cross. Trapped by the holy symbol, the devil snarled, "Release me." His voice rumbled like distant thunder. "Only if you swear not to claim my soul for 10 years, Jack demanded. Bound by the cross, the devil relented. Jack freed him, and the devil vanished into the night, leaving behind the stench of sulfur and a shadow that slithered on its own. The second encounter, a trap in the treetops. 10 years passed. Again, Jack felt eyes upon him. This time, he walked a moonlit field when the devil materialized, eyes blazing with fury. "Your time is up, Jack," he hissed. "You belong to me now." But Jack, ever the deceiver, smirked. "Before you take me," he said, "grant one last wish. Pluck that fruit from the tree." The devil, certain of victory, climbed the tree. But as he reached the top, Jack carved a cross into the trunk with his knife. The devil was trapped. "You've tricked me again," he roared, his voice laced with rage and agony. "Swear you'll never claim my soul," Jack demanded. Defeated, the devil agreed. Jack erased the cross, and the devil dissolved into smoke, leaving only the acrid smell of burning and a lingering chill. Jack's death, the eternal curse. When Jack died, his soul drifted to heaven's gates. But St. Peter glared down in disdain. "You live a life of sin, Jack. You cannot enter here." Jack then descended to hell. But the devil, bound by his oath, barred the gates. "You fool me twice, Jack," he sneered. "You cannot enter. But I'll give you what you deserve." He hurled Jack a smoldering coal from hell's fires. "Light your way through eternal darkness," the devil hissed. Jack placed the coal inside a hollowed turnip he carried, and thus began his endless wandering between worlds. His lantern, carved from the turnip, later replaced by a pumpkin, became a beacon of his damnation. Epilogue: the pumpkin's warning. Every autumn, as nights grow longer and winds turn bitter, people carve pumpkins and light candles inside them, a grim reminder of Jack. His soul still roams the darkness, guided by his cursed lantern. If on Halloween night you hear footsteps behind you or glimpse a flickering light in the distance, know it is Jack, the eternal wanderer, seeking a peace he will never find. Beware the glow of the jack-o'-lantern. It is not a decoration, it is a plea from the damned.